seeing the comments are just, when you think of social media, comment fields, it's usually not good. And I can't think of a negative or derogatory comment that we've seen on any post that we've done that celebrates someone who has run sub 3:30 for women or sub 3 for men. I do really think it's important to understand the history of the sport and all the people who have, everyone has done before us, before this running boom, that we're standing on the shoulders of.
Welcome to the Safe Space Running Podcast, where we're here to encourage, enable, and empower. Today's guest is Sarah Franklin, the project director of the Ted Corbitt Institute. Sarah, how are you doing today?
Hey, Chris, good, thanks. Appreciate you having me here today.
It's truly my pleasure to have you here. You're going to be our first guest actually for the Women's History Month, where we highlight women in running and walking. And your story is unique. But before we get into your story details, do you have any plans for this year in terms of running and walking? Are you participating in any events? What do you got set?
Yeah, I'm going to be doing a half marathon this spring in New Hampshire, not far from where I grew up. It runs right along the coast of New Hampshire, which there's not much coastline to be had, which is why it's a half and I guess not a full. And then in the fall, I'm running the Detroit Free Press Marathon, which sold out in like a week. And I'd set a reminder to sign up on January 1st when it opens. So I'm super psyched to be part of that.
That's awesome. I signed up for the half for Detroit, so I actually will be down there, so hopefully I'll be able to see you. But no, I've never seen a race sell out that fast. I believe it was 6 days for the marathon, and then 2 days later was the international half, and now there's a wait list. So if I decide to do the full, I'm going to have to call in a couple favors and say, hey, can you slide me in here? Because I heard it's beautiful.
Yeah, same. And just like what those guys are doing in Detroit we run 3-1-3. I think that's had a big impact on just the running scene in Detroit, and that it goes into Canada, and it just seems like a really great race with the tunnel and everything. So yeah, looking forward. I've never been to Detroit, so looking forward to that this fall.
That's awesome. I'm excited to see you out there. So Sarah is the project director, as we mentioned, for the Ted Corbitt Institute. And for those who are watching and listening who may not be aware, the Ted Corbitt Institute has a list of athletes as part of it, really around African-American born females and males that are sub 3. They have honorable mentions for 3:15, 3:30, but this is all rooted around the history of Ted Corbitt himself, who was very impactful in the running space as an African-American male. So my question to you, Sarah, to start it is, what got you involved with this kind of work, working with Gary Corbitt, who is his son, I believe, and working with establishing these lists and maintaining this historic piece of evidence for us?
Yeah, so I'd come across Gary's name and his work, just being kind of a running nerd is what I've turned into, especially in 2020 with all the civil unrest after George Floyd and all the DEI initiatives. I feel like Gary's name came up quite a bit as a kind of a representative for the running space and the history that he had preserved and the work he was doing to preserve Ted Corbitt's legacy. Ted Corbitt, by the way, being someone who a lot more people should know his name and his accomplishments, which is part of what we're working on with the Institute. So I'd been on Gary's website and I had seen him, just heard him on podcasts, seen some articles about him. And I just had my second kid. It was fall of 2021. And I was like, I wasn't going back to work. And I figured, I have a newborn. I'll have plenty of time to, help Gary with whatever he needs. And turns out my kid was a terrible sleeper. He's a great kid, but it was a rough go at the beginning. I didn't have as much time as I wanted, but I just sent Gary that note, an email, and just said, hey, I'm here. If you need help, let me know. He responded and said, you made my day. I said, okay. And then from then on, he kind of brought me into his orbit. I started copying me on some emails so I could see what he was working on. Nothing had been formalized at that point. I was just kind of an apprentice. And eventually it just got to the point where it's like, all right, like we're ready to go. What's next? And that turned into formalizing the women's sub 3 list for American-born Black women, creating, like you said, those additional categories to expand the list to 3:15 and 3:30, creating the list for men. So these were all things that Gary had in his pipeline, but just didn't really have someone to work on. It just, takes a lot of time and effort and outreach to try to get these things put together. And I just happened to be the person who was entrusted with that.
That's a huge undertaking. So run me through a normal day for you when it comes to pulling up these lists and, cultivating it to have that available for all of us. How much work does that take? What all goes into that?
So a lot of it, I'll start with the men's list. That started from scratch, probably a little over a year and a half ago at this point, we had, there were just, Gary is a repository of running history. He grew up in New York City when his father was running races in New York, all over the world. Ted Corbitt was the first Black American to represent the United States in the marathon. That was Helsinki in 1952. That was before Gary's time, but Ted Corbitt was instrumental in the founding of New York Roadrunners and was huge on the New York scene. So Gary was just tagging along to these races. So he was watching history unfold before his eyes. And because of that, he has that memory, and he also is just so well connected in the running community. So he just already, off the top of his head could name dozens of runners who had done this in the past. And then from there, a lot of social media outreach, just following accounts that we knew had, people who were posting that they had run sub 3, and then kind of using their network to see if they knew others, and just kind of expanding it from there. So a lot of it has just been Gary's own, memory, along with the connections that he has, that people were able to identify other runners. And then we tried to do a social media push, which obviously has quite a recency bias, because people who did this in 1950 aren't posting about it on social media right now. So we've just been able to at least get a more current record via outreach on, again, social media, mostly Instagram, and just word of mouth from other runners who have done it or know people who have.
It's amazing how people's memory works, because I barely remember what I had for breakfast, if I did have breakfast. But hearing how Gary has become just a repository of information, and having resources like you available to help put that into something tangible, something for us to reference. We've talked about it in our own personal conversations, but that list is prestigious, so to speak. It's always something that's talked about, and it continues to motivate both Black and male runners. Again, this is around history, or women's history. You guys introduced again the honorable mentions for 330. Can you explain to us why that was included as part of that?
Sure. So when we developed the men's list, so the women's list has always been sub 3 hours. That was how Gary created this about 10 years ago. The men's list goes up to 3 hours. That's the recognition category. The real cutoff, if you will, for like the list is 2:37, which is averaging a 5-minute 59-second pace over 26.2 miles. So that's give or take the equivalent of the women's sub 3 list. So we created the men's list with the honorable mention category and the recognition up to 3 hours, and we felt that it was appropriate to do the same for women with the honorable mention for 3:15, and then the recognition out to 3:30. That was in part just to create, again, more inclusion in terms of the runners who are being looked at as worthy, if you will, of being on this list. A sub 3:30 is an 8-minute pace for 26.2 miles. And then also just creating a pipeline so that we can follow women who are, who right now might be in the 3:29s, but are, shipping away. And then, oh, wow, like now she's up at, 3:22, 3:15. And it just makes it, it's just nice to follow the trajectory of the women now, who either maybe they're gunning for sub 3, or maybe they're just out, trying to get the best out of themselves. But just being able to have that in our records, and to be able to see that trajectory has been really valuable to us. And it just motivates more people too, who might be, in the 4-hour range, but wow, maybe I can get down to 3:30 and then keep going from there. So it's just been really, again, more inclusive, and just a nice way to get more women involved with the sport, and also just seeing the list and what their potential might be.
That's really cool. I think having I forgot the number that was mentioned around. It was I think it was around 40 or so. One of my friends who we had on the podcast not too long ago, Asia, she mentioned about being on the list, and it was only about between 40 and 50 Black women who broke under 3:30, which was astonishing to see that tangible number to that. But there has been such a growth in women athletics, especially Black women athletics, trying to pursue that prestigious 330.
Hmm.
Excuse me. And I thought that was really cool that you guys included that as part of your listing. So now that you've got this list, and you've got multiple lists, and you have a lot of people referencing it on social media, it's made huge headway in the community itself. Again, I see it all the time. My peers love it. Friends who refer to it. What has been the impact for you that you've seen, especially being in the background, working through all these, getting the numbers, getting the data? What has this impact meant for you?
So just seeing how we created the Instagram account for the Ted Corbitt Institute last January. So it's been a year, give or take, that we
Mm,
created the account. And we created the account, started, following a number of people, who, like we said, men and women who we knew had run the times that we were looking for, or who were striving to do so, or just Black men and women who were involved in the running community, just to kind of, try to create relationships and a network and get our tentacles out there. So then now, fast forward just a year, and we have people who are not on our radar, who we've
mm.
never heard their name, or we've never seen them like or comment on any of our stuff, but someone might reach out and say, "Oh, hey, like I just ran a three." A woman might say, "Oh, I just ran a 3:13 last week in insert marathon here." So we're at the
Wow.
point now where we've been able to have people who are following our work, whether actively or passively, knowing what we're doing and having that be an inspiration to them to get their name etched onto these lists. So just that the way that we've been able to generate community in that sense, and also just the way with some of our posts where we're featuring these athletes and their marathon time and whatever rank they are on the list, but just seeing the comments are just, when you think of social media, comment fields, it's usually not good. And I can't think of a negative or derogatory comment that we've seen on any post that we've done that celebrates someone who has run sub 3:30 for women or sub 3 for men. It's a really positive space. It's a very inclusive space, and it's a space that we're hoping to grow beyond just, the high performing Black men and women in the marathon, but making it something that can be an inspiration to everyone and also feels inclusive to everyone.
I love that people are reaching out to you guys now and, wanting to be part of this list and wanting to be part essentially of history is what we're at. This list really means a lot for it's good that we recognize all runners and walkers no matter their pace. And safe space has always been a place to, make sure everyone has equal footing, everyone has equal recognition, everyone has equal celebration. And highlighting these athletes who really put in a lot of time and effort going to a 3:34, whatever may be the case, it's tough. There's so much work that gets put in, that these athletes put in to achieve such greatness. And having a list like this really to sit back and it may seem simple of just, hey, this person ran this person ran that. But it means so much because of the platform that you guys created and who it's inspired by, with it being Ted Corbitt being the first of so many landmarks that he's, and opportunities he created for us of us African Americans to go out and enjoy distance running and not only just enjoy it, but to really be excellent at it. So I thank you so much for being a part of that and being part of this journey alongside Gary to really highlight and document history being made. I'm sure you've seen across the line that there's not many African Americans who are at that elite level, especially US born males and females. But to see that recognition, to see that honor be placed by people working in the background, I know it takes a ton of work from how we're talking today. You guys do a lot of grunt work behind the scenes to really celebrate us and celebrate achievements made for that. So I, for one, thank you so much for what you do.
You're welcome. And we'll keep doing this for it's still I wrote this down before we hopped on the call here, but at the 2025 Boston Marathon, there were 4,683 people, from men, women from all over the world, who finished in less than 3 hours, 4,683. And then based on our research, we have found 43 American born Black women since 1975 who have done that, and 220 American born Black men. So in just that one race, I mean, granted it's the Boston Marathon, but 4,600, almost 4,700 runners have broken 3 hours, and we all time have found 263 American born Black and women who have done the same. So it's still history making for Black men and women to do these races, run these times, and we're going to keep documenting it and celebrating it. Hopefully at some point we won't have to. It will become so commonplace that we won't necessarily need to track every single one. But until that happens, and it's a boom, but it's going to take a while. So we're gonna keep plugging away and talking to everyone that we can, and sharing their stories, and making sure that everyone feels celebrated and worthy of the history that they're making.
The visibility of it makes all the difference. Having it in front of us, having the numbers tangible in front of us, having that the numbers don't lie at the end of the day,
Hmm.
and
Yeah, and
having
just
that in
the
front.
historical context as well. Yeah.
Exactly that. It's what we need, especially in how things are in today's day and age. We always need to have continuing representation of all. So my last question to you to wrap things up has nothing to do with the Ted Corbitt. It has to do with you. And let's say someone comes up to you, they've never been involved with running before or walking, and they come and ask you, how do I start? What would be one piece of advice you give to them to start their running and walking journey?
I mean, the obvious piece would be just to go out there and, see what you can do, whether it's running, whether it's walking, whether it's a mile, whether it's to the next signpost. Um, from a less physical perspective, I do really, I mean, you see the work we're doing here. I do really
Mm,
think it's important to understand the history of the sport and who
mm,
all the people who have everyone has done before us, before this running boom that we're standing on the shoulders of. And just, women were not allowed to run the Boston Marathon in the 1960s until the late
yeah,
1960s.
that's right.
Um, there are so many stories of people who had to fight to run and walk in public space because they didn't have enough clothing on, or they would get weird looks, or they get catcalled. And this still happens today. I mean, it's running. A lot of running does take place in public spaces, and when you do that, you're putting yourself out there in a way that you might not even realize it. But people are watching, and people see what you're doing, and some people are uncomfortable because of that. And I think back 50, 75, however many years ago, when people were running in cotton clothes and sweatpants
Mm,
and heads, and there are just so many things about the sport that when you put it all in perspective, like, you just have to get out there and try, and just know that so many people have tried before you, and so many people will continue to try, and maybe you'll inspire someone else to try. But it really is just about getting out there, and also just understanding the context of the sport that you're putting yourself in, again, regardless of the distance or the pace, but just knowing that you're part of a revolution. And right now we're in a running boom, and to be part of that boom and to be able to push your body in ways that make you feel good mentally and physically. Like, maybe you're not going to go win any races, or maybe you might not finish your first 5K, but just getting out there and understanding what you're doing and the context in which you're doing it is so valuable.
context is such a powerful word in so many aspects, and I truly appreciate and applaud that you mentioned the context of the history of running. If I was to be transparent, me not knowing the history, I there were gaps in my history of running until I got more involved into the running space, until I got more involved with Black Men Run, and even again, I know the stigma of not even a stigma, but I know how running can be for African Americans. But once I got really invested into it, it became important to learn the craft and learn the context and history of what got here. And I really applaud that you mentioned the history of that. There's so many people who like to run. And again, there's nothing wrong with running in general, walking, but the sport was not always made for us. And I think that having people like you in the background, having Gary, having the Ted Corbitt Institute, having so many resources available to us to learn how far we've come to be able to participate and excel in this sport. I've also done the Selma to Montgomery Relay, which those who are listening, if you haven't participated, this is a really good one, but it really shows the importance of how far African American athletics have come and how civil rights have come into that. They're so intertwined together. They literally walked so we could run. And I would have never understood that if I didn't try to seek the context of why I can run in the first place. So I I'm almost at a loss for words because it's that hits so home, and I'm so glad I asked you your opinion on what new runners should do. So Sarah, I can't thank you enough for all the work that you do. I've already thanked you before, but the one thing I'm always going to do is thank you about 10 million times. That's just how I am. Blame my parents, but I mean it every single time I say it. Thank you for you taking the opportunity and the choice to really archive and make this part of history for everyone to be able to access, to be able to reference, and most importantly, you guys have created something that inspires. So thank you so much for your time. Thank you so much for your efforts and all of this, and I continue to wish you the best in your personal running journey, and I will see you in Detroit.
Yeah, let's do it. Can't wait. And thank you. I
Uh,
appreciate you taking interest in what we're doing, and using your platform to allow me to share a bit about our list and some of the work that we're doing. So always grateful to keep spreading the word, and yeah, see you in Detroit.
Sounds good.